What's up, fellow nerds? It's your boy, the OGGM. It's 10:30. It's the 15th day of February, which means half off candy. Woo! It's 57 degrees and partially sunny here in Ventura, California, with a cold breeze blowing through. We have a high surf advisory. And, of course, excessive heat, excessive winds, and earthquake warnings as well. In sports, Rams won the Super Bowls. Football season is over. Now it's time to focus on baseball and my Cubs getting to the World Series, which, of course, isn't going to happen, but I like to dream. It's Tuesday. It's February, which means we're talking about tabletop role-playing games or tabletop role-playing game product I absolutely love for no specific reason whatsoever. Sometimes I can't even really put into words why I love these games. I just love them. I don't know why. Could be the art, could be the story, could be the system, could be the feeling, could just be something about it that I absolutely love. So today we're going to talk about Savage Worlds. And my Savage Worlds is interesting because when I first looked at it and played it for the very first time, I did not like it. I was a huge fan of everything about Deadlands. I loved the system. I loved the setting. I loved the bennies. I loved the using the cards. And it was just the tactileness of Deadlands was probably one of the reasons why I loved it so much. Just having these things in your hands, the cards, the poker chips, everything about it just was very tactile. So I really loved it. I loved fiddling with the poker chips. I loved the cards. Savage Worlds came out, and I looked at it, and I was like, I don't get it. It just sort of feels like a system that's trying to use every dice simply because you have it, but it doesn't use D20s, and you can use the cards still, and you can have the physical bennies still, but the system was completely changed, and I didn't like it. And the weird thing about Savage Worlds is it makes absolutely no sense on paper. If you look through the book, the first thing your brain's going to go, at least if you're anything like me, you might not. I mean, this is just my opinion. My first two looks through the Savage Worlds book when a friend of mine was thinking of starting a Savage World games was, this doesn't work. There's no way this works. It makes absolutely no sense. On paper, this system doesn't work. It's a combination of, it's got a little bit of champions in there. It's got some points. It's got this weird thing where instead of stats and numbers, you have dice. And yeah, it just, in my mind, reading it didn't work. Until I actually played my very first Savage Worlds game, which was a short-lived Savage Worlds fantasy game. And then my second Savage Worlds game, which was Necessary Evil. And once I started playing Savage Worlds and actually got an understanding of how it worked, it worked. It may not make sense on paper, but when you actually play it, it works. And it's a great little system. I do know they've made some changes to it recently. I have picked up the latest version of the rules, and it doesn't really feel the same as it did before the changes. It feels a lot more like Champions, but it's still, I can say, every character idea I had, both in the short-lived Savage Worlds fantasy game we played, in Necessary Evil, the Savage Worlds superhero game we played, and then a friend of mine ran a Savage Worlds game, which was sort of a detective game, which then when he left became that weird Fate game that I played in twice. Every character concept I came up with, no matter how ridiculous, I could make in Savage Worlds. In fact, we had a thing where my friend would go through the book and pick one of the powers or something and challenge me to make a character that worked, using the power. And like the very first one he said was bouncing. He picked bouncing. And it's like, could I make a character that worked in a superhero role-playing game with bouncing? And I was like, I don't know, can I? But I looked at bouncing and I looked at a couple other things and I made sort of this super acrobat character, and it worked. I played him like, we play tested it like twice when we were play testing Savage World Supers, and it worked. Every single character idea I could come up with for Savage World Supers, no matter how ridiculous, I could make. And the character I was actually playing in Necessary Evil was really hard. I had this really bizarre idea of sort of a mad scientist who, was Necessary Evil, so he was a mad scientist villain named Professor Mad, who committed crimes simply because he was under the philosophy that some crimes just had to be committed, even if they were ridiculous. And definitely, if it was something nobody ever did before, he was going to try and do it. Like his backstory was everybody else has tried to steal the Mona Lisa. He tried to steal every other painting but the Mona Lisa. He left the Mona Lisa behind, and that's how he got caught when Necessary Evil breaks out. If you're not familiar with the plot of Necessary Evil, it's a superhero setting where basically the superheroes have all been killed by alien invaders through a very clever plot. So the only superpowered individuals that are left are the supervillains that were in jail at the time of the alien invasion. So it's up to these supervillains to save the world from the aliens. Interesting plot. The initial book didn't really do it very well, but I believe they have updated. So yeah, it's a great system that doesn't make any sense. So what it is, instead of like the usual numbers, like your strength is 15, you have a certain amount of points you can spend on the stats and the skills, and then each one of those equals to a rank of a dice you roll. So instead of having like a 14 strength, you could have a D4 strength, a D6 intelligence, a D8 constitution, a D4 wisdom, or whatever. So you roll that dice, and obviously the higher the dice, the greater the numbers. I don't really remember, obviously the max number was the best and the stuff like that. And the same thing with skills you could add dice to. It was a very weird system. In fact, it's really hard to explain it in words, which was part of my problem with it. Is like, just this doesn't work. This can't. I've got a D6 strength and a D8 intelligence, and I roll a D8 whenever I'm trying to make an intelligence roll, and then I can add a modifier. It just feels like they're using dice just to use dice. And a couple other systems have copied it. ICRPG uses the variable dice, D64 strength, D12, whatever. I think the Cypher system uses it. And yeah, it doesn't make sense, but it works. It's amazing how it works. It's amazing how it was so simple, and it still had the bennies, which are just great. I love the bennies. So you could still have, the poker chips. And if you wanted to spend a benny, you were literally putting a poker chip on the table, gambling the success. It had rules where you could use the cards to resolve combat, or you could use dice. It used every dice but a D20, but then there was a table that also was in there that could use the D20s. D12 was the best you could have in a stat. D4 was the worst you could have in a stat. And yeah, it's just, I love it. I don't know why, because it shouldn't work, except when you play it, it does. And I know I've said that, and I wish I could give an example, but every character I came up with, like I said, I was able to build. I had this weird mad scientist who was an inventor who, invented all these weird things, and we had to come up with rules that sort of, covered the inventions, like, and the fact that, some of the inventions would change, which wasn't really something that was in Savage World Supers. There wasn't really a gadgeteer rule. But we made it work, just... we explained it away. A lot of it was explained away as telekinesis. A lot of my inventions were just actually that my character had telekinesis and didn't know it. So as that type of scientist, he could make devices that only worked for him but didn't work for anybody else, kind of thing. And it turned out, it was because he was psychically charging the gadgets. And yeah. So yeah, I made some weird characters. I made a character who was basically a living jellyfish inside a box. I made all sorts of other weird characters for the Supers game, and they all worked. That was the great thing about it. So yeah, check it out, Savage Worlds. Like I said, there's a newer edition. The previous edition I played, and in the newer edition, there's a lot of change. There's also a newer edition of Necessary Evil and a Savage Worlds Superpower book, which I have. I haven't gotten to play it in a long time, so I'm not really sure how much has changed. I looked through the new Savage Worlds Supers rules, and it does have more of a Champions feel to it, but it still has that Savage Worlds feel. So yeah, this is like one of the hardest to explain why I love it, especially since it's so hard to explain how the stats work. So I'm really not doing it justice. I know other people have done Savage Worlds. DM Dave has done Savage Worlds. The man behind the scream has done talk about Savage Worlds. So you should check them out. But yeah, I love this game. Anyways, if this is a game you feel like purchasing, you should head on down to your friendly local game store. That's Seth's Games and Anime here in Ventura, but only for 2 more weeks. We were, of course, sad to announce that Seth's Games and Anime in Ventura is closing as of February 28th, the end of a 30-year history of gaming. But yeah, so this is reasons why you need to support your friendly local game store so they don't close, like Seth says. If you appreciate the content that's coming out of my mouth, let me know. If you don't appreciate the content that's coming out of my mouth, let me know, because I can't fix it if you don't tell me what's broken. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Help me hit 1,000 subs by August 4th. Till then, I have been the OGGM, your guide to all the tabletop role-playing game news, weather, sports, and general internet nonsense, reminding you to get off my land and go buy some half-off Valentine's Day candy. Blah, 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 blah.